Here's the latest this morning. Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook's lawyer blasting President Trump's, quote, cut and paste allegations, saying she never committed mortgage fraud. For the latest, here's Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall. Morning, Tyler.
Yeah, hey, John, good morning. So in this latest filing, we're really seeing Cook's lawyers double down on the arguments that we heard from them on Friday when I spent all day at the federal courthouse for the first hearing in this case. But they're perhaps putting a little bit more of a finer point on what they are arguing, that President Trump doesn't have sufficient cause to fire Cook. And we got really what felt like the most explicit denial to date that the allegations of mortgage fraud against her are not true. Now, I wanted to highlight 2 points that we saw in these filings. One is that her lawyers say that the mortgages in question were actually on forms submitted to the White House and the U.S. Senate during her vetting process, and that this all has to do with her private conduct before she was a Fed governor. We had heard during the hearing her lawyers argue that if there were discrepancies on these mortgage applications, it perhaps has to do with clerical errors and that Cook did not intend to deceive anyone. Now, you mentioned that copy and paste line. It does appear that her lawyers are trying to paint this as being politically motivated, like they have referenced how the administration led by FHFA Director Bill Pulte have highlighted these other allegations of mortgage fraud against officials that might not always agree with the president, like New York Attorney General Letitia James and California Senator Adam Schiff. Now, you ask the administration, and we heard a little glimpse of it there from the FHFA Director Pulte, but they're arguing that it is up to the president to determine what amounts to sufficient cause and that they actually gave Cook sufficient time to respond to the allegations. They point to the 5 days between President Trump calling for her to resign and then posting her termination on Truth Social, something that Cook's lawyers in these filings double down on does not amount to due process. John, if we really learned anything new from these court filings yesterday, it's really that we're not going to get a ruling on this temporary restraining order that Cook is seeking by the end of the week. And that's because the judge said that the administration now has until Thursday to give their own response.